I came across this video on TikTok, and while I have no doubt that this woman is far more educated than I am and far more able to speak on these things, she said some things that I do not agree with as someone who researches and studies these things. She's basically saying that mental illness is a black or a white thing. If you are criminally responsible, you're on this side or that side of the line. And that is the law. She's completely right on that. But what she's saying is that school shooters and mass shooters are not mentally ill. And I completely disagree with that. Mental illness is a spectrum. The law does not see it on a spectrum, and she's right on that. The law sees it as black or white. But she's saying that people who commit mass murder, mass shootings, they're not mentally ill. And I cannot get on board with that. So I want you to watch what she's saying, because this is the conversation. This is what matters. And she's saying some very, very important, amazing things. But I cannot get on board with the fact that people who commit mass shootings do not have mental illness. I can't get on board with that. So decide for yourself.
Everything that you have been told about mass shooters and mental illness is wrong. You have been told that in order to prevent these shootings, we have to do something about mental illness. The implication being that only a mentally ill person would commit such an atrocity. But I'm going to explain why this assumption is wrong. Most mass shooters do not meet the court standard for criminal insanity, nor do they meet any particular diagnostic criteria for mental illness. And to assume that they are all mentally ill stigmatizes genuinely mentally ill people, people who are already inappropriately feared, poorly served by our medical community, and subject to violence, homelessness, and social isolation. And finally, I will explain why making this assumption undermines our ability to genuinely understand why these shootings occur. So let me begin by explaining what criminal mental illness is. Ask the question, did the defendant know that the act was wrong at the time in which it was committed? And if the answer to that question is no, then they cannot be held criminally responsible. Not every state in the United States has a version of the insanity defense, but those that do use some version of this standard. Some additionally recognize that knowledge of wrongfulness itself is not sufficient, that one can know that something is wrong, but be so out of touch with reality that they are not able to control their behavior. Let me be clear. Most of the shooters that you have heard about on the news, those with household names like Eric Harris, Chris Harper Mercer, James Holmes, or Dylan Roof, were not compelled by mental illness to open fire in a classroom, a movie theater, a church, or a parking lot. These men were not out of touch with reality. They knew what they were doing, they made a choice to act, and they could have made a different decision. The McNaughton rule is rigorous. It is only claimed in approximately 1% of all criminal trials, and it's only successful about 25% of the time. This is to say that our courts rarely find it to be the case that people commit terrible acts because they're mentally ill. And frankly, we don't believe that either. We don't automatically assume that people who beat their children or kill their neighbors or commit armed robberies do so because they are mentally ill. For example, nobody believes that this man, his name is Bernie Madoff, acted as he did, which is bankrupting elderly people and children's charities, literally taking money away from kids with cancer because he was unable to control his actions. Mass shooters are in this situation. They are able to control their actions.
That's where she lost me. I cannot get on board with the Bernie Madoff comparison. Bernie Madoff did not strap 5 guns to his body and walk into a public place and slaughter people. He didn't do that. I cannot get on board with the fact that if someone is not criminally insane, that they're not mentally ill. You can have depression, you can have anxiety, you can have PTSD. All of those things are mental illness. You might not be criminally insane. I agree with her on that. But I feel like her assertion that unless you're criminally insane, mental illness does not play a role in your actions is wrong. And if I'm wrong on this, call me out, shut me down, because I am sure she is far more educated on this than I am. I just know that the people that I study 50 to 60 hours a week, write, research, film, talk to you guys about, those people are suffering from mental illness. They're not criminally insane. I agree with her. But I don't like what she's saying about the fact that mental illness is not a sliding scale. She's saying it's this or it's this. And I can't get on board with that. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I'm fine if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know. But this is why I do what I do. Sure as hell no, I don't do it to make money. I do this for the conversation. The conversation is what matters to me. So I would like for you guys to weigh in.